So one thing you may be seeing in a lot of designer job postings is around designing for behaviors or knowledge of behavioral economics or something around behaviors. And that may be a little scary to you as an earlier designer or a younger designer in their career, but really it can be quite simple. I'm James from Design Kindly. I'm a product leader and design leader with over 10 years of experience in helping teams become strategic thinkers from simply being ticket takers. And today, I'm going to talk through a few key processes and frameworks you can use to think about behaviors and think about designing for behaviors so you can land that job and also have effective conversations with your product team members and also your leaders. Deploying a behavior framework is actually a lot more simple than you may think. And it starts with one fundamental question. What do I want my users to do more or less of? That's it. That's the first question you want to ask yourself. And it can be almost anything. It can be, I want them to log in more often. I want them to upload documents more often. I want them to complain less. I want them to access help less. I want them to do fewer transactions. Any one of those answers is going to help you get started. If you are getting really skilled at this, you want to think back to outcomes. And I have a great videos on the 4 types of outcomes. And if you go back to that one, you can reflect on those and also then ask the question, what behaviors or what actions do I want my users to take that will impact those outcomes? Once you have answered that question and done that very first answer for yourself, so you can start with a foundation, then you want to work backwards from there. And you can do this by doing a very simple flow. So let's say you want your users to log in more often. How does a user log in more often? We want to go backwards to think about what is the very first point that a user thinks of or does before they log in. So that may be the user wakes up every day and says, hey, I wonder what's going on that app. Then the user actually goes to the login screen and then they actually access the app. And what you want to do is think about each step along the way to get to that end action. What are the different pressure points, friction points, or enablers that you can introduce to make that action and that behavior a lot more streamlined? What you really want to start with that flow, though, is gathering some basic data. So, for example, one way to remind a user to log in is often on a mobile phone, for example, through push notifications. So how often are push notifications sent? How many of them are opened and acted on? Then we take a look at the data around the login page. How many users are logging in on that page? How many are dropping off? How many have Face ID turned on? How many have biometric data turned on? That gives you a sense of how many people are making it through that gate. And then your last data point is how many users post-login actually maybe stay there for about 3 to 10 seconds. And that confirms that the action has actually taken place. When you have that data funnel in place, you start to understand where your friction points are. So for example, if your push notifications are sent to all your users, let's just say that, but only about 1% of those people actually engage with it, that tells you something about maybe not so much the design of it, but maybe the marketing of the product. And that helps you work with your marketing partners to come up with better features to nudge through push notifications, or maybe different data to push through push notifications. On the sign-in screen, what you probably will notice is that if people don't have biometrics turned on, you're going to have a pretty high drop-off rate at that point of login. So one thing you may want to encourage as a designer with your product teams is how do you design a process that encourages people to use Face ID? How do you design for a behavior that turns more people on to simplifying that login process? Then when you look at that very final stage, which is post-login, how long do people actually stay? You may notice that maybe after 2 seconds, 90% of your traffic drops off. As a designer, what that's telling you is that there's probably not a lot of value in that first screen they land on. So then you can think about how do we redesign this so we increase that stickiness and we increase that dwell time upon first user login. When you have that picture painted, it's really easy for you as a designer to bring up these pain points in partnership with your product teams and then start to negotiate how you're going to improve these steps along the way. Getting the okay with your product partners to start understanding this process and getting deeper into the design is really just the first part. With that okay, what you really want to do is then bring into fidelity and clarity why design is so important in increasing your traffic through each of these stages. This is where it's going to be really important to engage your research team. So the research team typically may sit within the design organization, so you should ask your manager, hey, do we have UX researchers? Do we have service designers? Do we have service design researchers? That will give you a sense of how many resources you have to deploy with you on this design exercise so you can improve some of those behavioral metrics. Once you have your researchers and your partners in place, this is when you want to start having multiple variations of some of your designs and testing them with users before production. This will give you quantifiable metrics and also qualitative stories about why users would prefer A over B. And hopefully one of these options shows a propensity to log in more, or a propensity to view Face ID, or a propensity to respond to a push notification. With this data of a good sample size, which we'll talk about in a future video, you'll be able to then go back to your product team and say, hey, we've done these different designs, we've tested it with the market, and here's what we're seeing in terms of behavioral lifts. Any product team would be grateful that you've done some of that legwork with your research partners to not only ideate, but also describe the data and shown that you've done the deep dives with human behavioral research to show that we're actually going to have a meaningful impact. This is the type of stuff that product owners need to take to leaders or finance partners to secure funding so they can demonstrate the ability to make some of those gains on the upside. Now, the other important thing for you to keep in mind is that when things go into production, you're going to start to see the same data come back. So remember that funnel we talked about before, working backwards. You're going to start to see changes in the data patterns. What's really important to show that you're listening and that you're strategic is to go back 3 months later, look at the new data, what's changed from current state, and then also compare it to the research data. Because that's going to really help the entire organization start to calibrate. Are we asking the right questions in our testing? Are we relying on the right populations for our testing? And also, how reliable is pre-production testing? All of these insights are going to help the organization and the digital teams move faster, learn better, and become much more efficient. And you're going to add so much more value as a designer. The other thing you're going to notice through this design process is that you're probably going to measure different things when you do your research. So for example, let's say you're testing push notifications and you talk to your product partners and you say, well, some users have said they're more likely to click on it, but other users are saying that it's going to kind of creep them out a little bit. And what your framing is going to be to your team is, what I'm saying is that we're going to have to make a bit of a choice between increased engagement and potentially lower satisfaction. That framing is not only strategic for you as a designer, but it also simplifies some of the decision-making for the product teams, which makes you more valuable. It's then up to you and the team collectively to decide what impact is more important, given the business context and the time, and to go forward with that. What's important is that you've shown your due diligence, and you've shown your sense of risk management, and it's going to help teams feel more comfortable moving together. So that's a summary of some of the key frameworks and processes you can deploy when it comes to designing for behavior. Again, think about the key question you're trying to answer. What do I want my users to do more or less of? Then backcast from that behavior, understand the digital flow, and test your designs to improve that flow along the way. And then frame your insights in trade-offs where they exist so that you and your product partners and leaders can make decisions as a team along the way. So give this a test out and leave in the comments how it's worked for you or any other challenges that you may be facing. I hope you found this video helpful. If so, give it a like below and subscribe for more. I'm James Law from Design Kindly, and I'm here to help you move from being a ticket taker to a strategic design partner. Thank you for watching this video, and I'll see you next time.